Hi, my name is Nicola Jennings. I'm Director of Kolnagi Foundation. Welcome to Kolnagi Foundation Lates, talks with interesting people about new art exhibitions, publications and events in the UK and around the world. Today I'm delighted to welcome Roxana Halls. Roxana is an internationally acclaimed artist whose work is in many public and private collections around the world and who's won several prizes, most recently the Rembrandt Special Prize. As we'll see today, Roxana's work sits within the tradition of feminist art, challenging notions of propriety, refusing self-censorship and frequently employing dark glamour and humour to reflect on gender, class, sexuality, and the act of looking at paintings. Roxana has for several years made her studio in a disused bar in a 1930s London theatre, which is now a bingo hall. And I have to say, it is a wonderful place. I've been there a couple of times and it's very atmospheric, and I can see how it must inspire you to create some of the wonderful works which we're going to see today. Anyway, Roxana, tell us about the first painting and what you're doing with this.
Yes, what am I doing with this painting? It's a good question. I think it's like so many of my paintings, it's one of those pieces where I'm not entirely sure where I was of what I was doing at the point of making it. I just had an impulse to do something with myself. It's a self-portrait, and a lot of my work is self-portraiture. I do see that as being a really critical kind of laboratory. So I think it was the first time that I consciously tried to depict the act of laughing, and also I was using food in a particular way. So the combination of those things came together in this image. I really only realised much later how significant this painting actually was, trying to capture this poised moment somewhere between humour and pain, which is kind of at the crux of laughter for me, I think.
It made me think about this self-portrait by Rembrandt laughing. And I know you said that you like Rembrandt, you look at Rembrandt and you're interested in him.
I do a great deal. I mean, I have a great deal, as much about the application of paint, the depiction of gleam on surfaces, and how to use ground and how to think about the layering of paint, and where to use impasto, where to hold off. But yes, I mean, I look at his expressiveness a great deal. And I think there's a lot of evidence to suggest that he did use himself in a similar way as a kind of laboratory. That he would, his etchings, in particular his self-portrait etchings, where you look at him trying out expressions, trying to capture something of these fugitive moments of human expression, and so that he could then utilise them in his larger figure compositions.
I was actually looking at how many self-portraits he's thought to have produced, and apparently they think it's something between 80 and 100. Nobody actually knows, because quite often he used costume, didn't he? And we're not entirely sure whether they were actual self-portraits or they were portraits of other people, because he's always casting himself in these different personas.
Well, I think that's one of the really interesting things about self-portraiture, isn't it? The way that you can use yourself as a tool. You have absolute license with yourself. I mean, in the best relationships that you can have with a model, you can have something of that sense of license, that sense of freedom. I mean, even the term model or sitter is slightly problematic for me, because I tend to see my work with other people as collaborative, and they're really much more like partners in crime than they are sitters. And there are times when I've asked myself to do things that I might not necessarily been entirely comfortable with, but anything in the service of painting is fine.
Let's look at the next work we've got up here, which is a work which you produced nearly 30 years ago, a very early work.
Well, I mean, I'm not shy of revealing my age. So I was 18 when I made this. And it's a strange one to look back on, inevitably. It's funny, at the moment, we're in lockdown. And inevitably, I'm finding myself thinking back to paintings that I made from many years ago. I think at the time when I made this, I was consciously trying to think about the way that the female body is depicted generally by men, how a female naked body is a fetishized object. And I wanted to think about, what is the conscious difference that one can make as a female artist when you choose to paint yourself utterly unvarnished. I'm not costumed, there's no filter, as it were. There I am, seated before my canvas, palette in hand, gazing upon myself with quite a relentless scrutiny. I'm not even sure that I would make this painting now. I don't quite know what I would make now, but obviously now I'm so concerned with using costume, illusion, and other devices, other strategies, so that this kind of way of looking doesn't entirely interest me now. I honestly think I saw this painting as being almost a kind of manifesto, as it were. Like I was laying out the foundation, a pathway. I think I genuinely thought that if I could really scrutinize myself, if I could lay myself bare in this way, then I was laying a kind of foundation for the future, for the way that I would try to paint, the kind of scrutiny that I might apply to my themes, to my interests.
Yeah. Well, very, very bold and wonderful painting. And it made me think of Dürer. I was thinking about how many male artists before the 20th century, I mean, obviously more recently we've had people like Lucian Freud who have painted themselves as nudes. But actually, there aren't that many pre-20th century. I mean, this Dürer is so extraordinary.
Yeah, everything that you've said. I think one of the most immediate differences that I notice when I look at his self-portraiture, I look at this one in particular, is the directness of the gaze. He is so penetratingly regarding the viewer, and I don't remember what my intentions were, but I'm certainly not doing that, I think, in my self-portrait. I seem to be looking beyond the viewer, beyond myself. I seem to be looking out and trying to look out into the future, into a future that I can't really imagine. But yeah, I mean, this is an extraordinary work, isn't it?
It's funny that you mentioned that thing of looking out at the viewer, because another painting that I thought of in connection with yours, partly also because I love the way that he dresses himself up in this painting, is Goya. And I know that you said that you're also very interested in Goya. Again, he painted a lot of self-portraits, but I particularly love this one.
Yeah, I think similarly. I mean, it's glorious. I love his work. I think partly I think similarly to Rembrandt, there's a certain kind of humility. There's a different kind of unveiling. They're penetrating in a very different kind of way. I mean, you talk about Dürer's, shall we say, vanity. Is that fair? Whereas someone like Goya, there's a certain kind of there's something about his humility that I find particularly engaging and inspiring, particularly as he got older. Yeah, there's a sense of resignation. I don't like to necessarily talk about it in terms of sadness, but there's a very particular kind of wisdom, which is not about self-aggrandizement, and that's certainly something that I'm very interested in.
Well, I was wondering with some of his later self-portraits whether it's also about a way of trying to communicate what's going on inside his head, because by that stage, he'd had that illness which left him deaf, and he looks so penetratingly in some of those later portraits, right out at us.
He does. Is he looking at himself? Is he presenting himself in order to ask the viewer to think about their own human frailty? I'm often referring to his late drawing, that incredible late drawing of his, on crutches, which is seen as a kind of self-portrait, isn't it? With his long beard, where there's the caption, "Still learning."
I know you said that you like this artist, Judith Leyster. Again, a woman who paints herself laughing quite often. I believe that originally they've looked at the under paint of this, and there was actually a self-portrait that she was painting.
That's really fascinating. I wonder why she decided to change that. Do you think it was because she wanted to have something on the canvas that seemed more kind of typical, more immediately recognisable as her?
Could be more saleable.
It's fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah. But she was incredibly successful for her time.
She was really successful, yeah. I mean, I've read various accounts of her that apparently she was great company. She was very humorous. She was very lively company, and really, I think, saw her work. I mean, many of her paintings do depict laughter. They do depict figures who might, in other periods, not have been considered to be appropriate subject matter. So she would depict people who were of the lower classes, laughing, being bawdy, licentious, and I suppose saw herself as being really at the heart of contemporary life in that respect. I mean, not just her, people like Jan Steen and Honthorst, Franz Hals and so on. As far as I'm aware, that it's a very particular period. And laughter and smiles, they're not that common. You don't see them that often. Certainly the use of laughter has really changed. It's really evolved. Where it occurs, it's occurred for very different reasons as time has progressed.
And then this one is very vivid, laughing while leaving.
Yes, that was kind of a fairly early one. I've painted many of these now. It's been an evolution. I mean, originally when I first started looking at laughter, I was associating it with food. So quite a lot of the characters would have food in their mouths. I did a whole series called Appetite, of women eating and being unbounded and displaying their appetites. It wasn't really about food, and it certainly wasn't about body image for me. It was much more about self-surveillance and the way that we police ourselves. We're consciously aware of the importance of being decorous, of being careful, of not being seen to display our appetites, our ambitions. The Laughing While series has proved to be an extension of that thought. My figures now have gone beyond trying to reject surveillance, reject scrutiny, and now they're refusing it utterly. Now they're concerned only with catastrophe, it seems. The Laughing While series, over and over again, these images have come to me that I haven't been entirely sure I'm ready to make them technically, and I haven't been sure that I've wanted to make that image. These women have burned this building down. I mean, I'm always wary of really talking too much about what I think is going on in a painting, because really what interests me is presenting a scenario and seeing how people respond to them. Seeing how people can overlay their own experience, their own very human questions, how they can weave them into an image, how they can respond to it. They did it. And I don't know how I feel about it, because the idea of burning down a house, it's terrible. And this is one of those ideas that came to me and I didn't entirely feel comfortable with, but I had to make it.
They saved the cats, though.
They saved the cats. I think in trying to describe these paintings, I've often talked about these women as being women who need to free themselves from traps, by whatever means necessary. And sometimes to free yourself from a trap, there's really no option other than to do something catastrophic. And sometimes you have to take what you need.
So just coming to this, I'm rather intrigued. You mentioned this painting to me, and in relation to the Laughing While series, is there a connection?
I almost feel there's a connection to this painting to dozens of things that I've made. It was shortly after I made that nude self-portrait earlier on, I moved to London. I didn't go to art school. I've received very little formal training, just a few lessons here and there, and I've observed other artists along the way. So really I learned to paint by going to the National Gallery. I spent most of my time, any time that I could, in the National Gallery to teach myself to paint, and there are certain paintings that I can think back to that really taught me, and this is one of them. Again, thinking about in terms of lockdown and the kind of nostalgic impulse that it's inspired in so many people. I found myself dreaming about the National Gallery a lot lately, and but then imagining myself looking at paintings and spending time with these paintings. This is one of the paintings that I've returned to over and over again, and so much of the painting and the composition is not concerned with the main action of the painting. This terrible thing, a murder is occurring, but so much of the painting is concerned with what is a really pleasing landscape. The woodcutters, they're so fascinating. So much of the composition there is taken up with these woodcutters who are just going about their business. It interests me, how this sense of disconnect can occur within one composition, but also how you have this strange sense of time unfolding. And there's the element of sound also. You can't look at this painting without imagining sound, and I think that's one of those things that does really concern me with laughter. That laughter it's an eruption from the body. It's something involuntary. But there is sound involved. Sound can emanate from it. And is it possible that a painting can do that? And I think, yes, it is.
Let's come on to this painting.
Yeah, I think it's partly because at the moment I'm exploring a kind of an avenue of thought taken from the Laughing While series. So Laughing While, brandishing a weapon. They're very much made in response to Artemisia Gentileschi's St. Catherine. When I saw this painting, I was struck by it in so many ways. The gaze, inevitably. But the idea that this woman was broken on this wheel is impossible to me. There's so many paintings. This is such a genre of painting, isn't it? Female martyrs holding, embracing the tools of their destruction. I don't believe this woman was broken on this wheel. This feels like something that she's going to wield. It feels like something that she's about to brandish. But again, I can trace a line back to this painting, this kind of ambivalence. There's something really elusive in her expression, that smile. And the fact that she does appear to be quite sweet, you know, the spring flowers on the table. But the suggestion that she's looking out the window, looking for her next trophy, her next kill.
Well, I'm really looking forward to seeing this series. Thank you so much for talking to me today.
Thank you. It's been lovely to talk to you, Nicola. Thanks for inviting me.